Fishkin co-founded Moz and helped shape modern digital marketing. But today, he's running two very different companies, Spark Toro, an audience research tool, and Snackbar Studio, a boutique video game shop. In both, he's trying to prove that you don't need venture capital or growth at all costs to build something that matters. This episode covers a lot of ground, from the psychological toll of tech's growth obsession to the quiet power of audience-first marketing in a world driven by AI and zero-click results. Rand explains why Spark Toro avoids the SEO label, even though search marketers love it, and how data from clickstream providers is rewriting how we understand influence. He also unpacks the tension in AI hype cycles, the problem with tracking LLM visibility, and why most brands are failing to future-proof their digital presence. This was an honest, thought-provoking conversation from start to finish. Let's get into it. Welcome to another exciting episode, milestone episode 100 of the Page 2 podcast. I'm your host, John Clark, and as always, joined by my partner in crime at Moving Traffic Media, Joe DeVita.
Hey.
And today, we're very excited to welcome a guest who sort of started it all way back in 2018 on episode 1, Rand Fishkin. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back, guys. Great to be here.
So I'll admit, I was a little nervous for this episode. I was telling Joe I had to do some jumping jacks before we hopped on the call just to get out some nervous energy. But I thought maybe Joe and I have a long list of questions. I know we won't get to them all, but maybe to start, we'll go back to 2018 and sort of follow up on maybe that conversation. So that was right around the time there was a Moz transition, launch of Spark Toro. And I know with the evolution of moving from Moz to Spark Toro, there was probably a lot of questions around what was negative in that experience. But I was curious, now that you've had some time to sort of look back on that period of time, what was the best part about sort of moving on and sort of starting something new?
I did not realize, John, how incredibly freeing it is to change your mindset from one of addiction to growth and to, financial success at the cost of everything else to a world where you prioritize what you actually care about. That is awesome. And, the world of venture capital is not built for that. It's built for the opposite of that. It does not create good incentives. It doesn't create healthy lives and promotes a lot of misery, unfortunately, and a lot of concentration of wealth and wealth inequality, which I'm not actually a fan of either. Even if I'm a beneficiary of it, it kind of sucks. Like it's weird, it's weird to be like, yay, I have millions of dollars. Oh man, God, there's more homeless people than ever in my city. Like that, it feels gross. I think you have to disconnect yourself from the emotional and psychological reality of other people and become an unempathetic dick just in order to survive, psychologically. And that appears to be what's happening with, most wealthy tech folks. So anyway, freeing myself from that world, I didn't know how good it could be.
Yeah, when you're in it, right? It's impossible to know until something forces you outside of it, right?
Totally. I think it's like people who get out of problematic relationships. Like I've talked to folks, of course, we're at the age now, I think you guys are around my age, mid 40s, maybe late 30s, right? But like around that age, people who've been in relationships for a long time, like have breakups or divorces, those kinds of things. And you talk to your friends, I think especially women, probably even more so than men. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's just so freeing. I feel like I can be myself again. I can explore who I am. I can get what I want out of life. I can prioritize the things I care about. I don't want to say Moz was the same as that kind of thing, but it was a toxic relationship of a kind.
Yeah. Very interesting. I know you have mentioned that you received many, many supportive messages during that time. Did that help you get the strength or the will to go back into entrepreneurship? Because it's not an easy life, right? It's tough and lonely at times.
Yes, those messages were amazing, right? And I did receive thousands of them after leaving Moz and have continued to, in all the years since. And now for, I get nice messages for stuff with Spark Toro and the work that I do here or indie founders with Peldy or even Snackbar Studio. But to be honest, I started Spark Toro the morning after my last day at Moz. So, we're talking about like a 12-hour transition period.
Right.
And I knew that I was going to do it again, mostly because I had to prove to myself that I could. I'm sure you guys have this, right? Where you're like, no, what if this thing that I did that I was good at in my life, what if that's the only success I ever had? Or like, what if I'm a one-hit wonder and, can never do it again? That was what kept me at Moz for at least the 2 or 3 years before my departure, was just that fear that I'd never be able to do it again. I'd be nobody without this one company that I built, that my identity was tied to it. It was dumb. Like, it was so dumb. I didn't know how freeing it could be to try again, even to try and fail. Like, it's okay to try and to fail and then to try again. It's no shame to go get a job. Like, I could have gotten a job, right? Like, there's something wrong with that. Yeah, it's just intense to have these feelings because, at least with me, and this is one of my top tips for every other entrepreneur is go work somewhere else first. Like, go get a few jobs, try a few startups, see what that life is like. Even if you hate it and it's terrible and you're like, oh my God, I never want to do the things that these founders are doing. That's great. You know what not to do. Like, I had nothing. Like, I dropped out of college. I worked at 2 retail jobs, and then I started the company that would become Moz, and just everything was learning it for the first time. And I don't recommend that.
Fair enough. I did think one of the things that was sort of interesting, sort of jumping ahead now, was you sort of removed yourself from SEO, directly, sort of adjacent. And yet when the Google leak came about, you were one of the first people that was sent the documents, which I thought was both interesting as it relates to SEO, but also, kind of validation of your influence in the industry, right? Which I think is sort of extends from those days at Moz. Can you go back to, and I might get the dates wrong, but I think it was May 5th, you initially got the documents of 24, and then there was some obviously making that public a couple of weeks later. What was, when you received it, there was a desire to remain anonymous, right? So there were red flags that would make it seem like maybe this isn't real. Like, how did you establish that it was and sort of actually decide to go public with that data?
Yeah, well, I'm lucky in that I have a big network of folks from my days at Moz, but continuing on today, that network continues to grow. And so I was able to sort of ping a couple of ex-Google engineers that I knew and was like, hey, does this look to you like it was written in the Google code base? And like, is this the right format? Are these the right kind of docs? Is this the right tree structure? All that kind of stuff. And they were like, either someone left Google and architected this intentionally, which would have been, God knows, so much time it would have taken, or they're like, or this is completely legitimate. Like, that's the far simpler Occam's razor answer. And then, I think obviously since then, it's been validated many times over by many other people. But that was quite helpful. I will say one of the things that frustrates me, you can tell me how you guys feel about this, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is misperception on my part. But my sense is that the world of search marketing has gotten a little bit stale in terms of its influencers. Like, the same people who you would see, keynoting shows and on stages and like referenced in blog posts and sort of, most followed on social media, LinkedIn or Threads or whatever, 10 years ago those are the same people that are there today. And for the 17 years that I was in the field, there was like new people popping into it every year or two. There'd be like, oh, this person's really on the rise. Look what this amazing person figured out. Like, all these new entrants to the field. I was a new guy, right? Like, when I started in 2003, people were like, who is this newbie? And now it just feels like that. Like, not that there hasn't been anyone new. I'm sure there've been, dozens, but the big names that you hear in the field are big names that I still recognize, and that bothers me. That worries me. And I think what you're talking about, where I was the person that Erfan, the guy who found the docs and basically alerted me to them, and Mike King and everybody else, he reached out to me because he thought I was the person, and
right.
I'm just worried that hasn't changed. I don't know.
I'd say there was a long period of time where SEO didn't change so rapidly. It's hard for a new person to break in and say, I've got this incredible insight. For the last 5, maybe 8 years, it's all been very tactical. And now it seems like it's becoming strategic again. Now it feels very exciting. But I think you're right. Before 2024, it was just very slow and steady, incremental change, same voices, and trust. But it seems like way different now.
I was going to say the same thing. It seems like it's hard to establish yourself as an expert because a lot of the core foundational principles, I don't think have changed that dramatically until maybe the last year or so, with a lot of these leaks in AI and LLMs and maybe some new things that are applicable there. So I think the hope is that with more of these new platforms to optimize around, like search everywhere optimization, as as you called it, like maybe there are some opportunities for folks to sort of step in and, become some of those newer faces and roles. I think, yeah, it's funny. We're always looking for guests for the podcast, and a lot of them sort of default to a lot of those same names,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And I've even reached out to folks who work in-house and maybe aren't on the speaking circuit and things like that. And then their company shut them down sometimes.
Yeah.
Like they're not allowed to come out, or they have to be, all the questions have to be reviewed and everything around AI gets struck. And then it's like, okay, well, what's
Not
the
interesting.
conversation? So I think,
Yeah.
so I think
what's the
I think
point?
it's difficult sometimes.
That corporate thing is, honestly, I think they shoot themselves in the foot PR wise. And what's so interesting to me is the corporate obsession with limited communication absolutely wrecks their opportunity to be in AI answers and LLMs and stuff. Because, right, of course, the corpus for LLMs, even the retrieval augmented generation stuff, like all of that relies on, hey, is this person or this brand commonly associated with like these words and phrases all over the web? And I can tell you guys right now, even this podcast, like the transcript of this podcast will get picked up by, Google and Gemini, by OpenAI, ChatGPT, like, and all the other ones, right? And then it will become part of the reason that people associate, Rand Fishkin or Spark Toro with audience research or audience research software, or audience research tools or whatever, right? It's like, because podcasts and YouTube appearances and speaking at conferences and events and like, getting press, all of that stuff is what gives you the ability to be in those answers. And so they're all so obsessed with it. Like they're so obsessed with it. And yet they won't do the thing that lets you be in that. It's wild. The irony is crazy.
I've always wished there'd be like a 24-hour news channel of just marketing, and it could go on all the time. It's like global. At night, in the middle of the night, it's like what's happening in Japan and other places. But marketers are so secretive. Like if it's not their corporate PR saying, "Oh no, you can't say that," it's just people just hold secrets. It's like, it's like that. You're never going to get like Procter and Gamble to say, "Well, this was a test we ran and it's usually successful," because they don't want their competitors to know. I feel like that's why it's mostly talking heads and agency people that can speak in generalities who get the exposure.
I mean, this is why I love third-party data, right? Because if Procter and Gamble is successful, like Datos and ComScore and Nielsen and SimilarWeb are going to see, right, in the clickstream data panel that, from all the devices, they're going to be like, yeah, look at this. This many, an increase of this percentage of people made it to the checkout page on like the Amazon URL for, Dove soap or whatever, whatever product they're selling. You can't hide from clickstream data. And so you can see the impact of that stuff. I love watching that after like a big outdoor campaign or Super Bowl ad or, whatever, and being like, oh yeah, everybody's talking about how this ad is so successful. And you go and look at the numbers. You're like, you did not experience, sales lift over the following 3 months.
Maybe that's a good segue into SparkToro. So SparkToro, correct me if I'm wrong, runs on clickstream data. Like that's how you put the graphics together. I'll be honest, I just recently started playing around with the tool. So maybe just for the audience and folks who haven't used it, can you break down sort of how SparkToro collects that data and then sort of translate that into graphical form?
Sure. Yeah. So we actually buy our data from companies like the ones I mentioned. Mostly, I think exclusively right now, we're buying from Datos, which has I think I saw their panels now 20 million devices worldwide. So, obviously there are, 5 billion internet users, right? So they're getting a small percent of the world's internet users. I think the panel is 10 million-ish in the US, right? So a good percentage share. And what they do is they, get people to opt in, through programs, right? It would be like, hey, you're going to download this piece of software onto your phone, or you're going to use this app on your desktop. And like, do you consent to doing this? And sometimes there's like an incentive around that where they're like, oh, well, pay for your internet for 6 months or something. And like, you give us your anonymized clickstream data, which is basically every URL that you hit in a browser. So that obviously has some frustrating exclusions. Like we can't see if somebody visits a page in the Instagram app on their mobile phone. But we can see if they visit that page in their desktop browser or in their mobile browser, in Chrome or whatever. And when I say we, Datos sees that, they anonymize, they aggregate, they build up like sort of their demographically, constructed panels so that there's not bias and, like, oh, we have whatever, a bunch of people from wealthy counties in the Northeast. So we're going to like lower that in the panel and we're going to raise up, like we need more sort of, rural panel stuff from the South or the Midwest or whatever. So they balance all that stuff out. And then they essentially sell us numbers. Like what we buy from them is data about, how many people visit certain websites, cross-domain visitation. So like people who do X also do Y, right? So if you, if you visit the Page Two podcast and like, listen to this podcast, what other websites do you visit in higher proportion than average than the rest of Americans? And so then when you go and you ask SparkToro, like, hey, my audience is the people who, listen to the Page Two podcast and they're super interested in digital marketing and SEO and whatever, SparkToro will then go build an audience based on that and then give you data about what they read, watch, visit, listen to, subscribe to. It's these YouTube channels, it's these other podcasts, it's these websites that they visit. They're using these AI tools more than average. They're using these search tools less than average. They're using these social media networks, like all that kind of stuff. We don't do what we just talked about in the previous question, which is we don't say, here's how many people bought whatever Pantene Pro V conditioner on Amazon. But Datos does sell that kind of data to lots of people in financial markets and e-commerce players and brands. And so does SimilarWeb, so does ComScore, so does Nielsen, all these folks.
Got it. There's been a whole bunch of news around Google removing the ability to expand results to 100.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
My initial thought was, I wonder if SparkToro is being influenced by that. And then I realized, no, they're collecting, user data. So they're sort of insulated by that impact.
Well, so there's one thing conceivably, which is the pages per visit to Google might go up, right? Because like you can't, if your default was, I like to search with 100 results, and now you have to only get 10 results. You want to click to page 2, like the podcast. Hey, the Page 2 podcast just became twice as relevant. You go to page 2, page 3, page 4, right? Like you're clicking. And so those clicks will mean that Google gets more browser time than it did historically. We're looking at visitation data, like visits to a site. We don't care how many pages are browsed, but other tools and data providers might show interesting things around that. So it does have a change.
You've been a little apprehensive of AI, I guess is a fair way to say it. And I think, yourself and Brittany Mueller also sort of talk about, there may be sort of this negative halo effect that could be coming, right? So with this overinvestment, you guys integrated some AI features into SparkToro. Do you see, I guess I'd love to get your thoughts on like where you see AI as useful versus maybe that potential overinvestment. I guess there could be a thin line, but also a wide gap there too.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think what I am is I'm skeptical of the hype and the hype cycle more than the technology itself. For example, AI is built on and it's basically just an advancement of machine learning, which I was a huge proponent of and loved and, evangelized for years when I was at Moz. Like we used machine learning for all sorts of things. You're trying to reverse engineer which elements in Google were influence the algorithm more, how we built domain authority and page authority. Like we use machine learning for all this stuff. And I was like, man, more marketers need to know about machine learning. They should be embracing it and using it. More technologists should. So I'm not against it. It has its uses. It's really great for some stuff. The problem is people are extremely confused about how AI systems work. I don't want to, people who are listening to this podcast probably totally get it, but a ton of people think it's just magic, or they think that they're thinking machines. They assume that this is actually whatever, the movies and like they've created that Hollywood like artificial intelligence. And nothing could be further from the truth. Like it's just spicy autocomplete. And sometimes you really want to know which words commonly come after other words in documents, on and off the web. Sometimes that is incredibly useful. It can produce things and give you ideas and let you brainstorm stuff and, expand on concepts. Awesome. It can help you write code. It can help you debug code. It can sometimes suggest medical treatments that you might have overlooked. Like it can do all sorts of things, but it is not a thinking machine. When people assume it is, it really, really bothers me. And of course, the AI tools themselves have this huge incentive to make themselves seem like more than they are. And the press and media are often to blame for, repeating their marketing messaging uncritically. So anyway, that's sort of
it's-
my long-winded rant about it. But do I think it can be useful? Absolutely. For example, we were talking about like how Spark Toro works, John.
Mhm.
And if you were to type in, right, one of the things you can do now to Spark Toro is just describe your audience in natural language, the same way you might describe your audience to me in a phone call. And you can just type that right into Spark Toro. And then we use AI to say, hey, take this prompt, essentially, right, this description of an audience, and turn that into domains and demographic attributes that most likely apply to this audience, and expand that. And then we turn that into the thing we send to our algorithm to get clickstream data and visitation data and all that kind of stuff. And it works awesomely well, because it turns out stereotyping a description of an audience is something AI is really good at. Like, it's just really good at that. This is a great use case. Previously, if you wanted to do that, you would have had to describe it to like me or Amanda or Casey, and then have us go, oh, okay, we get it. Now we're going to manually input what we, sort of the statistical, behaviors, and then get the output. Now AI can do that for us. It's great.
Can a young company use Spark Toro if they don't really know who their audience is yet? Can you help them build the persona for where to start? What's the minimum they need, I guess?
Yeah, the answer is technically yes. Like you can do that. I just worry when I recommend people do that. Actually, I recommend against people doing that. I strongly suggest that you go figure out who your core customers are before you come to SparkToro, because otherwise you might make assumptions. You might say, oh, well, the same people who visit like these websites or who have these characteristics, I don't know, you're selling my buddy Scott just started an ultrasonic knife company. He's an inventor, culinary inventor. He did like the first sous vide machine, home sous vide machine, and a bunch of other cool stuff. He was at Modernist Cuisine for a while. And he basically invented this technology that passes an ultrasonic current or wave through the knife blade of a chef's knife, a home chef's knife. And so it becomes insanely sharp, even if the blade itself is not very sharp. And so, it's this crazy cool technology. He's miniaturized it from like industrial settings into home settings. He just launched it last week. If he had come to SparkToro and said, hey, my audience is professional chefs in restaurant kitchens who do, an incredible amount of prep, and they tend to run their own restaurants, or they work for restaurant conglomerate groups at generally higher priced restaurants, right? And then you could search for that audience in SparkToro, and SparkToro could be like, oh, boom, here are all the outlets you want to hit. This is where you should do your PR. These are the YouTubers to invite. These are like the influencers. Here's the podcast you need to get on, YouTubers. I would strongly recommend against that, because if Scott had done that, he would have frustratingly found that professional chefs are not the first early adopters. Like, professional chefs have been using their knives and their structure for generations. Some of them will think it's cool. Some of them have, right? And there have been a few who bought it. But like, the early adopters for Scott's tech has turned out to be passionate home chefs, knife collectors, people who are obsessed with the best tests, like the knife sharpness tests, and like who love having that kind of stuff. Some like home bartenders. It's a lot of folks kind of like me, actually, more so than it is professional chefs in kitchens. Maybe that'll change in the future. But the problem would be like assuming you know who your audience is before you actually validate, right? And so what Scott did that was really smart is nobody likes this process, but he went and interviewed. He was like, hey, can I come by and like show you this? And did that over and over again with like hundreds of people, probably 1,000+ people. And then he saw who was crazy into it, who was like, you need to email me the day this is out. I want to buy it now. Can I invest? Like, finding those people told him who his audience and customers were. Then he ran those people through SparkToro, and that's how he's like, getting it out. So now, the people who are doing publications is like, oh, it's like GeekWire in Seattle and The Spoon and CNET and Eater. And like, it's not whatever, restaurantchefs.com or what have you.
Or there was an Anthony Bourdain episode where he was talking with a chef and he showed him his knife, and it was almost, it had been whittled down from here down to like this because he just sharpened it. And that was the only knife he used. Yeah, it makes sense. Chefs like what they like, right?
Yeah, I mean, right? Like, I like what I like too. It would be very hard to convince me to switch away from using OBS to some new software, or switch away from Wistia, or switch away from Profitwell, or whatever it is. Like, you got your WordPress. I know I should get off WordPress. Like, I know it kind of sucks. I know Mullenweg is kind of a troll now, and like I should get off WordPress, but I'm so
Where would you go?
comfortable
Where
with
would you
it.
go if you got off WordPress?
I haven't even explored.
That's the thing.
I'm gonna
Joe, no, go. Yeah, sorry.
I want to try to. I have a good these entrenched consumer behaviors that we all everyone has them, right? So maybe I can bring us back to use of AI a little bit here,
Yeah.
because I think John and I were listening to the webinar that you did with the Datos team about the first tab search, and how there is an increasing number of people who are using LLMs. There's even some anecdotes you'll hear about people who just don't use Google anymore because they get everything they need from Perplexity or whatever. But it's small. They're probably outliers. Google's still very strong. What's it going to take for an LLM? What's it going to take to change that consumer behavior from relying on Google for answering all their questions to start relying on a Chat GPT or Perplexity? Any thoughts on that?
Let's see. I think if you go back in time and get the judge in the DOJ Google case to
2020?
No, this year, the one that was just
okay.
announced like a month ago, and get the judge to enact actual remedies to prevent Google's monopoly domination of search, you might make a dent. Otherwise, I don't see it happening. I think it's possible that a ChatGPT or looks increasingly like Perplexity will not be it. Their growth rate has slowed considerably. They're having a tough time, breaking out. Maybe Gemini is growing nicely, but sorry, not Gemini, Claude, right? Gemini's Google. But the problem is that Google owns everybody's homepages, owns everybody's default behaviors, is now allowed to continue, paying Apple to be the default, paying Firefox to be the default. They have 2 decades of user behavior, which, as we found out in the DOJ case, is the number one ranking factor now, right? That Google essentially looks at what do people search for, where, how, in what order, what do they click on, what do they click the back button on, what do they stay on? Like that's their bread and butter. And nobody else has that. ChatGPT doesn't have it. They can't buy it. There's no way to get it. Google's been told that they'll have to do limited sharing of some data with rivals. I strongly suspect that will not make a big difference. And then I also think that Google is, because they still send traffic out, granted, an ever decreasing amount, but Google sends, 2,000 times the amount of traffic out that ChatGPT does. It's just really hard for like ChatGPT to say, hey, you should let us crawl you and like stop blocking us. Nope. Right? Like websites have basically said, screw you, pay me. Maybe I'll let you crawl me. But Google is allowed to crawl everything for free, right? In fact, Google, it costs you money to have Google crawl your site, right? Like you're paying the bandwidth on that. I don't see how someone is going to overtake them. I think maximum we're looking at, in the next 5 years, maybe Google loses 5% market share. That's at the outside limit of what I can imagine right now, unless something crazy different happens with the tech or some new, maybe a new administration comes in and a new case is launched against Google. You know what? I'm not a fan of the current presidential administration of the United States, which probably surprises no one. But I will say they're very vindictive. So if Google pisses them off, it is not impossible to imagine a future where like Trump is like, screw Google, I hate the Google, like no Google for anybody, right? And then I don't know, like at the ISP level, the US government does like China did for a long time and just redirects all Google traffic to, I don't know, Grok, like whoever his buddies are.
Oh my God. So you had a really good post on LinkedIn about how you could potentially start to get a sense of what ChatGPT results look like, where let's say you had 100,000 people across the world all do the same search, right?
Yes.
And what those variances are. Like how important do you think that type of data is in the light of, maybe ChatGPT never goes over like 5 or 10% of search volume?
Well, so I think the interesting part about it is different for every different company. So even let's imagine a future, like let's fast forward 10 years and ChatGPT is, I don't know, maybe twice the size of Bing. Like they're between 5 and 7% market share of all searches, but people use them for a lot of things that aren't just search, right? So there's lots of like tasks and processes that people run through ChatGPT. I mean, they, in fairness to them, they get 2.5 billion prompts a day now or something, I think they announced.
Right. Yeah.
So like, and the average session is like 8 prompts long. So if you were really going down to it, but I think the thing I could fathom is that companies, some companies in particular, maybe it's like B2B SaaS companies or HVAC suppliers or, I don't know, science fiction authors, like they find that their audiences are really using ChatGPT. And so they care a tremendous amount about their brand being presented in the results, right? I think media hype is skewing too many people to care right now, but some people should probably care a lot, right? For some people, it matters a huge amount. And I would also say, ChatGPT can give you one output, right? They can say like, hey, here are 5, people we'd recommend to redo your walls at your house. And then you perform 20 Google searches off of that because you're like, oh, I'm going to check out every one of these. I'm going to look for their website. Then I'm going to Google for their reviews. Then I'm going to Google for alternatives. Then I'm going to Google and see if they like do this particular kind of thing. If they service my neighborhood, I'm doing a whole bunch of searching. So like ChatGPT can be the progenitor of a huge amount of search. You guys saw there was like that SEMrush study. We could try and link to it in the show notes or whatever, but the SEMrush guys used the Datos data set and they analyzed what people do after adopting ChatGPT. And you can see that their number of Google searches goes way up. Like as soon as they start using ChatGPT, they Google way more times than they used to. And I think a big part of that is because you are getting answers that then lead you to more questions. And those questions are often better answered by Google. So I don't think it's like a world where people won't or shouldn't care about that. I think they will. I think the problem is like, is that actually trackable yet? Well, is it meaningful at all? For example, a lot of these tools that supposedly track your LLM results. Do you guys use any of these? Not yet.
A very limited capacity. Usually it's on a client request basis, but we don't trust the results yet or even know how to really apply the results because we can never replicate it.
Yes.
And so I don't.
This is how I feel exactly. Like I'm actually I know a couple of guys at Gumshoe. I've had like people from Profound reach out to me. I know SEMrush is offering something on this. Ahrefs is offering something. Like there's all these people, right, who are investing in, hey, we're going to track your LLM results or whatever. Great. But running a prompt against an LLM, once every week or once every month, and then telling me where my brand came up or if it did, I just can't tell if that is meaningful at all or actionable or worthwhile. And people are putting so much. This is the thing that pisses me off. Joe, it boggles my mind how much energy people are putting into the tracking of it, how much companies are obsessed with tracking it versus how little they are willing to do anything to try and influence it. What the hell is that about? Like, do you guys remember the early days of SEO, right? It was like, oh, well, we can't really track, our Google rankings or whatever, but we're really going to try to get it at the top. And then later, after we try to get ranked to the top, then we're going to see how well we're doing. Why is it this way with LLMs? I don't understand.
Yeah. We interviewed Marshall Simmons a couple episodes ago. And when I was preparing for that podcast, I came across an email thread for the IMEC lab. You remember this?
Yeah, I remember that. Yep.
And I think the last test that we had run was trying to determine if Gmail actually crawled links in Gmail ads. And at the time, the answer was no. I think we probably assume that's not the case anymore. But when you were sort of thinking through like how you would potentially build a cohort of people to actually get insights on how varying the prompts are, right? Like how often they change in a certain time period. Do you ever like miss those like testing groups, like creating those tests and getting the result? Because you're analyzing so much data even today, right? Like that was what you've always done and done it very well. But I feel like that testing component has been missing from our industry for quite some time. It'd be amazing to evolve it to some sort of LLM testing group.
Yeah. I'm always surprised how few people do this because I love it. So I stopped doing the IMEC thing, IMEC, that like labs project, post Moz, but I still do it quite a bit. We just ran something last year where we asked a big cohort of a few hundred people to click on all the social media links. So like we created a tweet from a profile that hadn't existed before, all this kind of stuff, to see whether Twitter passed a refer string, right? Whether it would tell you, hey, this visit came from Twitter, how consistent it was, all that kind of stuff. Twitter, by the way, does pass refer string reliably. Facebook does not. LinkedIn does not. So like, it's super weird. I think in our test, like 15 or 20% of LinkedIn clicks came with no refer string, but the other 75 or 80 did. Why? Who knows? question mark, what's LinkedIn doing? I can't figure it out. There's no pattern to it. It wasn't like mobile does, but desktop doesn't, right? But I love doing tests like that. I think the LLM world desperately needs one. I want to run this panel like we're talking about. I'm actually talking to a buddy of mine who's a software engineer who can like help do the analysis of it. So I think look for an email in your inbox because I'll probably ask you guys to contribute.
Amazing. We'd be happy to.
I know the NDA that you have signed has kind of pulling you a little bit out of the world of search marketing the last handful of years, and it's coming, I think that it expires soon. I think I heard you said maybe this year in a podcast.
Yeah, I think this year, maybe June, my non-compete expired. Yeah, so I still have the NDA, which is in place for as long as, I don't know, maybe forever, around the transaction, when Moz sold. But I am technically able to accept money to do SEO things now. I just kind of don't want to.
Well, so, all right, that's my question. Maybe that's your answer. But are there conversations that you've shied away from, maybe because of that NDA, that you're kind of excited to jump back into when that expires?
I mean, one thing, what's nice is we don't have to be as obsessively worried about features we add to Spark Toro. So like for a while we were like, oh man, is there a way that this could help with SEO? If there is, we really should like not build it. Now I think we can more reasonably do things like there's this new, it doesn't exist in the product except for me and Amanda and Casey, but Casey's like built this thing again using AI that basically takes the results from a Spark Toro search, so an audience analysis, and then passes it to an LLM with a prompt to take further action. So if you were like, hey, I want to analyze the content on my website homepage and tell me whether I have missed, key aspects that would appeal to this audience for like landing page. Maybe that's more CRO than SEO, like conversion rate optimization. But those types of things are things that we want to enable in the future. We already know that we saw like 25% of our customers exporting, like they just go to SparkToro, they export the CSV, then they upload it to ChatGPT or Claude, and then they do a bunch of stuff with it. They're like, hey, help me make a better landing page for this product, or help me like optimize my PR campaign, or help me with messaging for my content marketing, whatever it is. Come up with a bunch of social media post ideas that would do well with this audience. And so we basically were like, oh man, we should just help people directly with that, right? If we can do some nice like prompt engineering and get consistently good results, we can just send it to the API of the LLMs, return the results, show them nicely in the SparkToro interface, and probably save people both time and energy, but also give them something more useful from the results. So that thing is something I no longer have to fear doing. It's nice to be out from under those. This is one of the reasons, not to bring it back to politics, but like I was so excited when the Biden administration got rid of non-competes. Like they basically said, hey, those are illegal. That is interfering with people's ability to make money and their in commerce and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the rule got rolled back, and it just makes me sad. It's like surely there must be something good this administration's going to do. Like, when's it coming?
Well, maybe to ask it a little bit differently. I mean, I think SparkToro can definitely has SEO use cases. Does that open up the marketing of some of those features in the application?
Yeah, conceivably. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but my concern with marketing a product is that when you start to say, hey, this product does everything, you really you lose your specialization and you lose your ability to do hyper-targeted, high-quality marketing. Like I think that's way, way more difficult, especially for a small company. Like SparkToro is 3 people, we're under $2 million a year in revenue. Like we do not have huge budgets to be thrown around. We don't have a big marketing team. So we have to be extremely judicious with everything that we invest in. And as a result, I want to focus. I really want people to, when they say, hey, where does my audience hang out on the web? What are their sources of influence? Where can we go to reach them? What content should we create? What PR should we do? What influencer marketing? What social media marketing? I want them to think of SparkToro. I don't want them going, oh, isn't that kind of an SEO tool? And like, I don't want them thinking of us as a competitor to SEMrush or Ahrefs or Moz. Like we're not. You can't substitute what we do for what they do, or vice versa. I think that's actually a really good thing. I don't want to compete with them.
Yeah, for sure. They have a totally different marketing budget cohort there that you don't want to be competing with.
There's already so much confusion. Speaking of large language models, like when people ask about top SEOs, I'm always on those lists. And so people think, even though it's been, God, almost 8 years, right? So people think Rand Fishkin SEO, so SparkToro must be SEO. So let me try to use SparkToro to do SEO. That's a terrible idea. Even by saying SparkToro and SEO, I'm probably shooting myself in the foot because this podcast is going to get picked up by all the large language models. So anyway, just for ChatGPT's sake, SparkToro, not an SEO tool. Not an SEO tool. There you go.
Well, before we jump to rapid fire, I had one other question. We're coming up on Q4 very, very quickly. You had some great data from Datos, and there were a couple slides around e-commerce, Amazon, obviously the lion's share.
Yep.
Do you have any thoughts on how any of that data could be applied to someone who is planning or trying to finalize up their Q4 planning for e-commerce specifically?
Let's see. So when you look at the e-commerce platforms that are doing quite well with American consumers or European ones, you're going to see a lot of names you recognize: Amazon and eBay and Shopify and Temu and all, Walmart, et cetera. Where the way I think about this is if you are big, really, really big, and you have good margins and you have a strong brand, it pays to probably put your product in the places where your audience is already going, right? So if we're talking about a brand that's doing north of $50 million in e-commerce revenue, I would be thinking about your Amazon presence, your eBay presence, your Walmart presence, potentially, right, depending on your brand, as being as important as your homepage and your product page and your, checkout process, because you really need to think about how consumers are finding you. There's like a skincare brand that I used to buy that was exclusively available on their website. I can't actually remember the name. Now it's started to be available on Amazon because they've gotten really big, which makes sense. And I'm ashamed to admit that because of the free shipping and the faster delivery and the fact that the prices are a little bit lower, I've been using Amazon, right? Like I just add it to my regular order. I've got Prime, like blah, blah, blah. And I would think about that. But if you're a smaller brand and you're niche, Amazon kind of sucks for you. Like in a lot of ways, they take a big cut. They present alternative products and competitors up against you. They undercut your brand's perceived value and exclusivity. There is a superpower in being like, oh, you can't find this on Amazon. You have to go to their website. That really means something. There was that big olive oil brand that launched, I think Graza or something like that. They did huge numbers, like absolutely massive success story in the consumer goods space. And their strategy was, we're available in retail stores that rarely sell food. Like that was their initial thing. They went to boutiques and like clothing stores and jewelry shops. And they're like, oh, what's this olive oil? Oh, it's very special. You can only find it here and a few other boutiques. Now you can get it on Amazon. Like it's huge, it's big. You can find it at Whole Foods, whatever. But that exclusivity when you're small makes a big difference. And I would think about that. So the answer to every marketing question, John. It depends.
Yeah.
I know we only have a couple more minutes left, and you can treat this next question as rapid fire if you want to, but it's kind of a prediction question. The importance of the website in the next 5 years. Do you think it changes? Do you think a lot of commerce still happens on your own website, but a lot of it moves to Amazon and Walmart and other places? Does the importance of a company's website become less important in the next 5 years?
Relatively speaking, yes, but from an absolute value, no. By which I mean, do not, under any circumstances, start investing less time and energy and importance in your own website, but also make sure you are investing lots of new time and energy into your presence on Google's homepage and in their AI overviews and in what ChatGPT says about you and in, how you show up on, if you're in e-commerce, right? Amazon and eBay and all these other places. Like you have to now curate all those other things because we are moving to a zero-click world and a zero-click web. So you got to do zero-click marketing.
We need you for another hour. We need you to cancel your next meeting, Rand. We've got more. We got too many questions.
I know. All right. Well, I'll come back on the podcast. We'll do episode 2, zero-click boogaloo.
Yes. All right. A couple really rapid fires. What is the most helpful word to know when arguing in Italian?
Wow. Basta.
That was mine too.
Basta. It means stop. It's like stop right there. Stop you right there. Basta.
Yeah. Love that.
Or if you need to like slow someone down, weirdly, you know how the way to make someone so upset in an English argument is to be like, whoa, don't get excited. Like, calm down.
Yeah.
That doesn't work in English, but weirdly in Italian, piano, piano, piano actually works nicely. It's sort of like take it soft and slow. And I've noticed at least my wife's family, like they can bring it down a volume notch, which is nice.
Calming word too.
Yeah,
Right?
piano, piano.
We filled out the agency survey. Any idea when those results are coming out?
Thank you. I think we're still collecting until the end of September. Probably they will launch the end of October is my guess after the analysis.
Okay, perfect. And then last one, 5 years from now, do you think you'll be more known for Spark Toro, Snackbar Studio, or something you haven't even started yet?
If I had to put money down, I would say it'll probably still be Spark Toro, but that is hope only because I think Snackbar Studio is going to be much more associated with Geraldine and Nicholas and Francesco and Miriam, the other founders of Snackbar Studio, who are actually making the game. I'm just the CEO. Like all I do is pay the bills and like recruit and interview and, sort of say, how's the schedule going, friends? I can't make video games, but they can. Alert Mouse is interesting too. Like Alert Mouse has gotten a shocking amount of traction for a private beta product. Like you can't even use it, right? It doesn't exist yet, or it doesn't exist publicly. But like we have been shocked at how many people have somehow heard about it here or there and then like email and say, oh, I really want this. I think it's just because Google Alerts sucks so much.
Yeah, it's awful.
Like it's so bad. And people kind of are like, oh, I don't really want to pay a huge amount for like TalkWalker or Mention. Surely there must be something that's like cheap and good to track my mentions on the web. Scott used it for Seattle Ultrasonics. It's been pretty damn great for that, like tracking the launch.
Yeah, awesome.
Maybe, I don't know. Hard to say.
All right, this has been amazing. Before we let you go, let everyone know where they can find you.
Sure. Well, yeah, if all of this sort of marketing, zero-click marketing, data around AI tools and search and all that is of interest, I'm on the SparkToro blog regularly publishing that stuff, which is sparktoro.com/blog. I'm most active in social and like the videos that I do, stats that I share on LinkedIn and on Blue Sky, Rand Fishkin on both of those. And if you would like to assume the role of a chef in a magical version of 1960s Italy who fights arcane boars and then brings their pancetta and guanciale back to your restaurant and makes your spaghetti alla carbonara, then you should check out snackbarstudio.com. Actually, I have a little, look at that. There you go. There's a little characters from it. You guys, thank you so much for having me. This has been a delight. I look forward to our next episode, and I wish you well in the crazy, crazy world of marketing and SEO.
I couldn't have wrapped it up better myself. If you enjoyed the show, please like, rate, and review. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much, Rand. Bye-bye.
Take care.